Hi everyone, my name's Andrew McMillan. I'm a poet. I used to work a lot for First Story. A few years ago, I did a couple of residencies at different schools in Bradford. And then I kind of moved cities, moved to a university rather than kind of being freelance. So I don't have time to do that anymore, but I like to keep in touch with First Story. I started off a long time ago. This is a pamphlet that I first did. I reckon it was 2009. So how long ago is that now? 11 years? 10 years? 11 years? And so I did 3 pamphlets before I did a full collection of poetry. Pamphlets are almost like an EP, I guess, before a full album. They're a way to kind of try things out. So the process of writing is that you might do a little bit of sending stuff out to magazines, you might get stuff in there, you might kind of do performances at open mic nights, and then eventually it just feels nice, I always think, to sort of have something tangible that you might want to give away or you might want to sell. And so I did this pamphlet when I looked like a much, much younger man. There I am in a very fetching cardigan, I think sat on top of a moor somewhere. And then I did 2 more pamphlets after that. And then in 2015, I published a book called Physical. So my very battered reading copy of it, that sort of brought together a lot of stuff I've been interested in for a long time. So I'm interested in kind of ordinary places, real places. I'm interested in masculinity, in physicality, in sexuality, in class, and all those kind of things, I guess, came together in that book. And then 3 years later, I published this book, which is called Playtime, which is where these little figures managed to make their appearance on the front cover. And I think it's always nice in your own writing to pull on those things from your own life. And as I say, we're going to do some writing together. I'm going to join in and do some writing as well. And we look forward to it. I've not run a workshop like this for a long time. I'm used to kind of lecturing in university. I now work at Manchester Metropolitan University. I teach creative writing at undergrad, at postgrad level. And so this sort of thing is kind of what I used to spend a lot of my life doing and don't do so much anymore, I guess we'd say. And so I'm kind of really excited to get back into it. And just to remind you about social media, so take a picture of what you write in, kind of quote a line from it maybe as we go along. Remember to tag First Story at First Story on Twitter, or on Instagram it's at FSBooks, and with the hashtag Write From Home, which is what we're all obviously having to do at the minute, Write From Home, wherever that might be. And so I guess make sure you've got a pen. Make sure that you've got something to write on and something to write with. That's the great thing about poetry. That's all you'll ever need to do. And that's all you'll ever need in order to do a successful writing workshop. And we'll just give you a second, I guess, to get prepared then, to get all that stuff ready. I've got my pen. In fact, no, that one's not working. That's not a good start. I'll get my backup pen, which I think is always important. And I've got my notebook, which is sadly very blank at the minute. So I've not had a chance to do much writing, but hopefully we're going to be able to change that today. We'll get started. So I think that what I'm generally interested in poetry is something that feels quite plain and quite direct. I think that poetry should seem as unpoetic as possible. I think that most people, when they start writing poetry, we compare it sometimes to kind of putting on a telephone voice when you answer the telephone. So you try and put on an accent that's slightly posher, maybe slightly kind of more formal, in a way to impress people, or in a way to sound kind of more high status when one answers the phone. And it can be the same with writing, that we can think, oh, I'm writing a poem, and so it has to have this kind of highfalutin language. It has to be poetry with a capital P, which is often how I've come to describe it. And I just don't think that's true. And I think that one of the things that happens when we start writing, certainly when I started writing, is that we tend to kind of rely on abstracts because they sound profound, but there's nothing underneath them. And so if I said to all of you to try and write, if I said to all of you to draw a picture of a fireplace, and we all went around and we all showed what we'd drawn, we might draw different kinds of fireplaces, we might draw kind of different decorations, but we'd all generally draw something that was kind of like rectangular or square with a kind of fire in the middle, because it's a concrete thing that we could all imagine. But if I said to all of you, draw love or draw hate, we'd all draw something different because it's an abstract noun. It means different things to different people, and your only job as a writer is to take what's in your head, and put it into the reader's head. So what can you see in your head? How can you put it into the reader's head and make them see it as well? That's the only task of writing. And the more that you rely on abstracts, the harder that becomes. And I guess a lot of what I'm interested in exploring, a lot of what we're going to explore during this hour, is that notion of how we might concretise the abstract. You're going to hear me say that word concrete, I think, a lot as we go through. And so to start us off, I want to imagine that we're going to meet an abstract, I guess. That's how I kind of often think about describing it. And so I just want you to, first of all, write down an abstract noun. And so, or an emotion, if that's easier for you to kind of think about. So love, loss, boredom, fear, excitement, lust, hope, anything like that. Just write one down. So I'm going to go with love, just for ease, but try and choose one maybe that's a bit different to that. I'll give you 30 seconds-ish just to get that down. And so once you've got that, I want you to think about kind of pre-lockdown or post-lockdown life. Think about somewhere that you might meet someone. And so the park or the shop or the cinema or school or college or wherever it is, think of somewhere that you might meet someone and just write that down as well. So I'm going to go for the beach because I should be on holiday on the beach right now, but I'm not. I'm at home. And so far, what you should have is kind of 2 words on a page. My handwriting's terrible, I know, don't write in. So I've got love and the beach. That's what I've got so far. You might have some others, maybe tweet them out with a hashtag and the @firststory, and we'll see what people have got. But from those 2 words, or those 2 kind of bits that you've got, I want us to now make a title that says, I met, and then whatever that abstract is, at the, or in the, and then the place. And so my title becomes, I met love at the beach. And so yours might be, I met fear at the cinema, I met hope at the shop, I met sadness in the takeaway, who hasn't been there. And so turn it into a title like that. I met whatever the emotion is, whatever the abstract noun is, at the or in the whatever. And then the task is essentially just to use that as our title. So my title is now, I met love at the beach. I'm going to write that out kind of slightly more formally at the top of the page, so I've got a title. I met love at the beach. And then the job is essentially to follow that to its logical conclusion. And so I want you to imagine that you really did meet that abstract. And so what was love wearing? What did it smell like? If I touched its skin, did it have skin? If I touched its skin, what did it feel like? What did their voice sound like? How did they move? What colour clothes are they wearing? All that kind of stuff. And just maybe write, it might come out as a poem, it might just come out as notes, it might just come out as a bit of descriptive prose for now. But try and describe that meeting of that abstract noun as though it was the real person. So if you had love, how would it move? How would it sound? What would their voice pitched be like? What colour clothes did they have? How did they smell? If you touched their skin, what did it feel like? What conversation did you have, if you had any at all? What interactions kind of happened? We've got about just over 7 minutes, and just a quick start exercise, just see what we can get down. There's no wrong answers. That's the best thing about this kind of exercise. We're just generating stuff at the minute, but we've got I met love at the beach, and let's see what happens, or whatever your title is. So I've got I met love at the beach. You might have I met fear at the cinema. I met joy in the pub. That's my favourite one. But which one have you got? And then let's get into it. And then we'll check back in with each other in 6 or 7 minutes. I've not finished a page already, I'm just turning it so I can copy things out more neatly. Don't panic. So imagine everything. Every time you think that you've got to the end of what it is you've got to say, just try and push it that little bit further. Try and push it that little bit farther. The more that you write down now for this exercise, the more that you'll have to play with down the line, and the easier the kind of next exercises will feel for you as well. Got about 5 minutes left. We've got about 3.5, 4 minutes left. Just anything that you can get down. As I say, it might be notes, it might be a bit of descriptive prose, whatever you've got. And 3 minutes. 3 minutes just to get as much more as you can down. And a final 2 minutes, 2-minute warning, much more down as you can. About 90 more seconds. 90 more seconds. And coming up to a final minute. Final minute. Final 40 seconds. Final 30 seconds of writing. And sort of just finish up that line or that thought that you're on for now. Excellent. So, don't worry too much about whether that came out perfectly, whether there's bits you're really happy with, bits that you're not so sure of. Essentially, what we're going to do is use that as a kind of starting block to build on as we go through different exercises. What I love about that exercise is that I think it immediately gets us into concretising abstract things. And certainly when I started writing poetry as a kind of angsty 16, 17-year-old, the sort of stuff that I was writing was, I'm in a kind of black chasm of despair, I'm in the abyss of my own sorrow. And on the surface of it, you think maybe that sounds a bit profound, but it don't mean anything. It means nothing. It's kind of empty underneath. And what I'm really interested in us doing is digging down into concrete specifics. And a way of kind of trying to find ways to talk about these abstracts in a way that we could take, again, what's in our head, put it into the reader's head. That's the only job of poetry. That's the only job of any writing, I think. And so I'm interested to see what we got. Tag at First Story, at FS Stories on Instagram, if you're using that, and hashtag Write From Home. And we'll sort of see a couple of the best lines that you came up with. Mine, I kind of had to play back with I'd love, which turned out to be kind of quite hard, but I had phrases like love seemed to skip rather than walk that day. And I thought love seemed to know me before I arrived. That's how I started that phrase, love seemed to know me before I arrive. And what I want to do is kind of build on this first exercise, which is about just concretising that abstract, getting something concrete down on paper. And we're going to try and expand that now in this slightly extended next exercise. And so what I want you to do is just have a minute just to look through what it is that you've done, have a minute just to look through what you've been writing, and just kind of draw a line under or put a box around a kind of phrase or a line that you really like, a phrase or a line that you think speaks really well to what you were trying to say, or you just surprised yourself when you wrote it, which always aim to surprise ourselves, I think, with what we write, or maybe you didn't expect that to come out of the pen. The pen seemed to run away with you, and you didn't think you'd end up writing that. Just whatever it is that you can find, just kind of highlight that one thing. So I really like that opening line that I managed to get down. Love seemed to know me before I arrived. But it might be anything that you've got down, and just see what happens. And so once you've got that line, we're going to harvest it out, essentially, of that first exercise. So whatever it is that you've underlined, whatever it is that you've drawn a box around, just turn the page and write that at the top of a fresh sheet of paper. So I'm writing, love seemed to know me before I arrived, and you can write whatever it is, that line, that phrase, that moment that you've pulled out, that note, that bullet point, whatever it is you've pulled out of that first exercise, stick it at the top of the fresh sheet of paper. And now what I want us to do, and I'm going to give us, again, 15-ish minutes, maybe a bit less, see how we get on to do this. I want us to have a think about how this last couple of weeks have felt. These last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, have felt, I think, incredibly challenging. Some of us might have been shielding, some of us might have had to go back to work or to school, some of us might have been caring for relatives or friends or going out for the first time in a little bit, some of us might still be at home and watching the news and worrying about the state, quite rightly, of the world. And so what I want us to do is just try and inhabit how it's felt for the last couple of weeks, try and inhabit how you felt personally. And so not how you think you should feel, not how the world has told you that you should feel, not how the media is trying to make you feel, but how have you felt personally, on a personal level, in the last few weeks. And then what I want you to do is take that opening line that you've written at the top of the page and use that as your jumping off point. But rather than kind of that imagined scenario from the first exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to use that first line as a jumping off point to write about how it's felt this last couple of weeks to be in lockdown, to be at home, to be isolating, to be shielding, if that's what we're doing, just to be living through this kind of historic moment. And so I'm going to start off mine with that phrase, love seemed to know me before I arrived. It's quite an odd one to jump off, I guess, into this kind of feeling of isolation that we might have had, but I'm going to do my best with that one. You might have lines that fit better with how you're feeling, you might have ones that feel like a bit of a wrestle, but just whatever you can do. So you've got that first line, and just try and use that as a jumping off point to explore how you felt in this last couple of weeks. And again, I'll give us sort of 12, 13 minutes, and then we'll check back in with each other, and we'll see how we're getting on. And again, I should always say this. I think don't worry too much about it making sense yet. Don't worry, I've thrown a pen with excitement at saying this, but don't worry too much about it making sense. Don't worry too much about following the kind of imposed logic. Follow the logic of what the work wants to say. Follow the logic of the pen. Follow the logic of your own brain. There's time for editing later. There's time for kind of making it stronger later. I think it's important just to get stuff down and get stuff on the page in this first instance. And so I'm going to pick my pen up from where I've thrown it on the floor and join you in doing this next exercise. So we've got the first line. I've given you that because I'm a generous guy, and we're going to see where we go from there. I've got it. I'm too old to be bending down. So, love seemed to know me before I arrived. You've got your own first line. Let's see where we go. Think about spelling or grammar or punctuation. We're just getting stuff down. Try and make it neat enough to read out or to share with people. My handwriting's often so bad I can't read it back to myself, but that's just my problem. Try and write neat enough for you to be able to read it yourself, but other than that, it doesn't matter. Let's say we've got 10 minutes, 11 minutes maybe. I'm feeling generous. it's okay to stop and think, as I'm doing, before going back into it as well. You don't have to do it all straight away. We've got, I'd say, 6-7 minutes to keep exploring that. How's it felt this last couple of weeks? Got about, I'd say, 5 minutes left. Maybe just over. I'm feeling generous. Just a couple more minutes. So it's expanding on that first task. One more, mate. This email from Domino's Pizza's just sitting in the corner. I have to get rid of it. There we go. Don't tempt me. 30 seconds. 30 seconds left. Fifteen seconds left. Perfect. So put your pen down, draw a line under that again. At First Story, at FS Stories on Twitter, hashtag Write From Home. Share some of the best kind of bits that you come up with. I'll be looking out. I kind of ran with that opening line that I had. Love seemed to know me before I arrived. And then that made me think of the dog, and how the dog that we've got so excited to see me all the time. And so I just put, love seemed to know me before I arrived. The 4 paws and the claws we haven't been able to cut since it shut down. So she announces herself like a tap dancer when she comes into the kitchen. And so there's that idea of the dog as love, and so a way of taking that abstract notion of love, concretising it as the dog. Everyone can imagine a dog. Back to what I said at the start, if I told you all to draw a picture of a dog, there might be different heights, different sizes, different types of dog, but you generally draw kind of body, 4 legs. Everyone kind of can picture that. Whereas if I say love, you'd all draw something different. So if I can somehow in what I'm writing draw that connection between the love and the dog, that's a way of concretising it. That's a way of putting it into the reader's head in a slightly different way. So draw a line under that for now. So I've just got another kind of extended task for us, I guess, and I'll give us a bit more time to do this. I think that certainly in the last couple of weeks, I think in the last couple of months, one of the main things that we've been really living with is fear. I think fear is a big abstract that we've really been living with. This entire thing, a pandemic, is abstract. Politics is abstract in many ways. Kind of fear, health, inequality. These are all massive things at the minute, but they're all abstract ideas that are hard to wrestle with, hard to grapple with. And I think in many ways that can add to our feeling of dislocation, that can add to our feeling of not quite being sure where we are. And so I think that it's really hard to write poems, good work, about abstract nouns. I think it's really hard to write any piece of creative writing with the title that's an abstract. So if I said, right, let's all write a poem called Fear. Let's all write a piece of writing called Uncertainty. It's inevitably probably going to be quite bad because it's impossible to do. And so what I want you to do is think about one of the things that's on your mind at the minute. It might be a fear, it might be a worry that you have, it might be something really personal, you don't have to share it with anyone if you don't want to yet. It might be something really personal, it might be something kind of global or national that you're kind of worried about or scared about, and whatever it is that comes to mind, I want you to just write that at the bottom of the page. Just write that at the bottom of the page. So we're not writing at the top, we're going to write it at the bottom of the page. And I'll explain why in a second. That's important. So get whatever phrase that is, and just write it at the bottom of your page, and so it'll appear kind of like that at the very bottom rather than the top. I'm interested more and more in what happens when we don't make something the subject that we write about, but when we write towards it, because I think that opens up different avenues. I think it opens up different possibilities for what we're going to write. And so you've got this phrase, this worry, this fear at the bottom of your page, and what I want you to do, in whatever way you take this to mean, is to write towards it. And so that might mean chronologically. If it's fear about something happening, you might start before and try and approach it. It might be kind of philosophically, it might be emotionally that you're trying to write towards this subject, trying to write up to it. You might never get there. You might have to keep turning the page and moving the bottom of the page over and over again. You might never get there. But rather than write about that fear, about that abstract thing that you're worried about, try and write towards it, I think. The disclaimer I always say in workshops is that you should only write about things that you feel comfortable writing about, that you should only kind of go to somewhere that you know is safe for yourself. But I think equally it's important to push us ourselves. Great writing exists in that space that makes you slightly uncomfortable, and it need only be for you for now. You don't have to tweet it at First Story, hashtag write from home. You don't have to share it with your friends, with your family. It can just be for you for now. My favourite ever quote about poetry from Alice Walker. And she says, I wasn't thinking about publishing these poems. I was just trying to get through the night. And that feels so important to think about with any kind of writing. So you've got that fear, you've got that worry, that thing that might seem too big to kind of handle or to tackle, that might seem too abstract. You've got it at the bottom of the page. I'm going to set you off now. You've got about 22-ish, 23 minutes. Right towards it. Not about it. Not about it. It's not the subject. It's not at the top of the page. But right towards it instead. And see what happens. So just keep going. As I say, you might never get to the bottom of the page. What's at the bottom of the page might shift to the bottom of the next page, might shift to the bottom of the next page, and that's fine as well. Just keep going, keep writing towards it rather than about it. Keep going. Keep moving down to the writing towards it, not about it, but towards it. And see what happens. About 15 minutes, just under 15 minutes left. Just over 10 minutes left. 10, 12 minutes, I'd say. Keep writing towards it. About 8 minutes. 8 minutes left. Six or 7 minutes, I reckon. If you've got to the end of where you kind of want to write, if you've got to the end of, you managed to get to the end of the page, or you managed to kind of approach as much as you wanted that fear or that kind of worry that was at the end of the page, just be going back through. It's time to do a bit of editing as well. Our first thought is important to get on the page, but it's not always the best thought, so there might be a bit of time to do some editing for the last few minutes, but also you can be still writing, still approaching, still constantly trying to write up to that thing that you had at the bottom of the page. And it's 4 more minutes. That's 4. 4 more minutes. There we go. 2 more minutes. So again, you might be making those final edits, you might still be writing, that's fine as well. Writing towards the thing instead of about it. Let's give us another minute or so. And again, let's be finishing up that line or that phrase that you're on for now. So, we've done a lot of writing. I know I have. I've got pages and pages of it, but we've all got that. And what we've been trying to do, or what I've been trying to encourage us to do, is to dig into those abstracts. I think that we all start off with abstract when we start writing. We start off with love and hate and anger and fear and happiness and whatever it is, but the mark of really great writing is how we distill that and how we dig down and concretise that word again, how we concretise those abstractions. And so we started off with that exercise about I met love at the beach, I met happiness in the takeaway, I met sadness in the pub, whatever it is, just trying to concretise those abstractions, trying to imagine what they might be like if we personified them as people or as anthropomorphised them as creatures, made them living things, and how that gives us a language maybe to talk about them in a way that we might not have had before. And then we took a line from that and tried to use that as a way into writing about how we felt in the last couple of weeks. And I guess I did that just because I think writing any kind of contemporary poetry about the current moment is very hard to do because we're living through it. It's hard to write about something whilst it's happening. And so maybe that was a way into doing that. Maybe that was a way of, of being able to do that. And then we also, just then in that extended exercise, which we just finished off, we thought about something that is a fear or a worry for us, for ourselves. And I said at the very start of that exercise that you don't have to want to share that. That might just be for you for now. I think the important thing, one of the things I think that happens with writers, with writing, is that we censor ourselves too quickly. We imagine an audience too quickly and think, oh God, I can't possibly write that because X is going to read it or such and such is going to read it. And that doesn't necessarily matter in the first instance. What matters is that you get it down on paper and that you write it, and the rest of it we can worry about, I think, much later down the line. And that notion of writing towards something rather than about it, I think, is something to really take forward into all future writing exercises, all the future writing that you do, because it's sometimes too easy, I think, to make something the subject. I'm going to write about this. It's a subject, it's at the top of the page, it's too easy. What if you write towards it? And actually, what I think you'll find has happened, this might have happened for you as you were writing, is that what you thought you were writing about turned out to not be the thing that was most interesting. Maybe halfway through you went on a bit of a diversion. Maybe actually by the end you jumped over that initial fear and you ended up somewhere else. You ended up kind of further forward than you thought you might do. It's never quite the thing that we end up writing about is never the thing itself. It's always something else. There's always something else at the back of our mind that's potentially more interesting. And, you know, the key thing to do as a writer is to surprise yourself, is to shock yourself sometimes, I think. If you're not surprised by your own writing, then why should anyone else be? I guess is the thing. And so that notion of writing towards something, approaching it down the page rather than writing about it, can be a really powerful tool. It can be a really important thing, just to explore the range and the three-dimensionality of something and to see what's going on. So hopefully, you know, we've skipped through quite a lot of stuff there, but hopefully some new ways of trying to concretise those abstract nouns, those abstractions that creep into our work, and some stuff for you to kind of carry on with. So I do encourage you, again, to tweet at, I'm just checking what it is, tweet at First Story, or on Instagram it's at FSBook. So take a picture or kind of write out your favourite line, show us there, and the hashtag Write From Home as well. So show us what you've been doing over the last hour. If I'm feeling brave enough, I might share some of mine as well. And just to remember, a quick reminder that National Writing Day is the 24th of June, and there'll be national writing activity that young people like yourselves all across the country will be taking part in. So get involved in that as well. And just thank you for spending this hour with me in this kind of, it's got a bit lighter now, but it was a bit dark at first. It's kind of dark and dingy part of my study. We're being looked on by a portrait of Robin randomly, one of my favourite singers, which has been quite nice. She's been the presiding spirit over a lot of what we've done today, I think, together. So hopefully you'll have felt that presence and it'll somehow by osmosis have come out in the work that you've been doing. I've been Andrew McMillan. Thank you for spending this hour with me. And keep supporting First Story. Keep writing. The most important thing you can do is to keep writing. We are living through historic times. In the future, in 100 years, in 200 years, they'll study the newspapers, they'll study the political records, they'll study the medical records, but they'll study the literature as well. They'll study the poetry, they'll study the novels, they'll study the stories and the plays and the films that come out of this time, and you're contributing to that, and that's vitally important. So keep writing and stay well and stay safe. Thank you.